Beowulf, anonymously written, translated by Burton Raffel, chapter 32. But the thief had not come to steal. He stole and roused the dragon, not from desire, but need. He was someone's slave and had been beaten by his masters, had run from all men's sight, but with no place to hide. Then he found the hidden path and used it. And once inside, seeing the sleeping beast, staring as it yawned and stretched, not wanting to wake it, terror-struck, he turned and ran for his life, taking the jeweled cup. That tower was heaped high with hidden treasure, stored there years before by the last survivor of a noble race, ancient riches left in the darkness as the end of a dynasty came. Death had taken them one by one, and the warrior who watched over all that remained mourned their fate, expecting soon the same for himself, knowing the gold and jewels he had guarded so long could not bring him pleasure much longer. He brought the precious cups, the armor, and the ancient swords to a stone tower built near the sea, below a cliff, a sealed fortress with no windows, no doors, waves in front of it, rocks behind. Then he spoke. "Take these treasures, Earth, now that no one living can enjoy them. They were yours in the beginning. Allow them to return. War and terror have swept away my people, shut their eyes to delight and to living, closed the door to all gladness. No one is left to lift these swords, polish these jeweled cups. No one leads, no one follows. These hammered helmets worked with gold will tarnish and crack. The hands that should clean and polish them are still forever. And these mail shirts, worn in battle once, while swords crashed and blades bit into shields, and men will rust away like the warriors who owned them. None of these treasures will travel to distant lands following their lords. The harp's bright song, the hawk crossing through the hall on its swift wings, the stallion tramping in the courtyard, all gone. Creatures of every kind and their masters hurled to the grave." And so he spoke, sadly, of those long dead, and lived from day to day, joyless, until at last death touched his heart and took him too. And a stalker in the night, a flaming dragon, found the treasure unguarded. He whom men fear came flying through the darkness, wrapped in fire, seeking caves and stone-split ruins, but finding gold. Then it stayed, buried itself with heathen silver and jewels it could neither use nor ever abandon. So mankind's enemy, the mighty beast, slept in those stone walls for hundreds of years. A runaway slave roused it, stole a jeweled cup, and bought his master's forgiveness, begged for mercy, and was pardoned when his delighted lord took the present he bore, turned it in his hands, and stared at the ancient carvings. The cup brought peace to a slave, pleased his master, but stirred a dragon's anger. It turned, hunting the thief's tracks, and found them, saw where its visitor had come and gone. He'd survived, had come close enough to touch its scaly head, and yet lived. As it lifted its cavernous jaws through the grace of Almighty God and a pair of quiet, quick-moving feet. The dragon followed his steps, anxious to find the man who had robbed it of silver and sleep. It circled around and around the tower, determined to catch him, but could not. He had run too fast. The wilderness was empty. The beast went back to its treasure, planning a bloody revenge, and found what was missing, saw what thieving hands had stolen. Then it crouched on the stones, counting off the hours till the Almighty's candle went out. And evening came, and wild with anger, it could fly burning across the land, killing and destroying with its breath. Then the sun was gone, and its heart was glad, glowing with rage. It left the tower, impatient to repay its enemies. The people suffered. Everyone lived in terror. But when Beowulf had learned of their trouble, his fate was worse and came quickly. Chapter 33. Vomiting fire and smoke, the dragon burned down their homes. They watched in horror as the flames rose up. The angry monster meant to leave nothing alive. And the signs of its anger flickered and glowed in the darkness, visible for miles. Tokens of its hate and its cruelty spread like a warning to the Geats who had broken its rest. Then it hurried back to its tower, to its hidden treasure, before dawn could come. It had wrapped its flames around the Geats. Now it trusted in stone walls and its strength to protect it, but they would not. Then they came to Beowulf, their king, and announced that his hall, his throne, the best of buildings, had melted away in the dragon's burning breath. Their words brought misery. Beowulf's sorrow beat at his heart. He accused himself of breaking God's law, of bringing the Almighty's anger down on his people. Reproach pounded in his breast, gloomy and dark, and the world seemed a different place. But the hall was gone. The dragon's molten breath had licked across it, burned it to ashes near the shore it had guarded. The Geats deserved revenge. Beowulf, their leader and lord, began to plan it, ordered a battle shield shaped of iron, knowing that wood would be useless, that no linden shield could help him, protect him in the flaming heat of the beast's breath. That noble prince would end his days on earth soon, would leave this brief life, but would take the dragon with him, tear it from the heaped up treasure it had guarded so long. And he'd go it alone, scorning to lead soldiers against such an enemy. He saw nothing to fear, thought nothing of the beast's claws or wings or flaming jaws. He had fought before against worse odds, had survived, been victorious in harsher battles, beginning in Heorot, Hrothgar's unlucky hall. He'd killed Grendel and his mother, swept that murdering tribe away. And he'd fought in Higlac's war with the Frisians, fought at his lord's side till a sword reached out and drank Higlac's blood, till a blade swung in the rush of battle, killed the Geats' great king. Then Beowulf escaped, broke through the Frisian shields and swam to freedom, saving 30 sets of armor from the scavenging Franks, river people who robbed the dead as they floated by. Beowulf offered them only his sword, ended so many jackal lives that the few who were able skulked silently home, glad to leave him. So Beowulf swam sadly back to Geatland, almost the only survivor of a foolish war. Higlac's widow brought him the crown, offered him the kingdom, not trusting Herdred, her son, and Higlac's to beat off foreign invaders. But Beowulf refused to rule when his lord's own son was alive, and the leaderless Geats could choose a rightful king. He gave Herdred all his support, offering an open heart where Higlac's young son could see wisdom he still lacked himself. Warmth and goodwill were what Beowulf brought his new king. But Swedish exiles came, seeking protection. They were rebels against Onela, Healfdene's son-in-law, and the best ring-giver his people had ever known. And Onela came too. A mighty king marched on Geatland with a huge army. Herdred had given his word, and now he gave his life. Shielding the Swedish strangers, Onela wanted nothing more. When Herdred had fallen, that famous warrior went back to Sweden. Let Beowulf rule. Chapter 34. But Beowulf remembered how his king had been killed. As soon as he could, he lent the last of the Swedish rebels soldiers and gold, helped him to a bitter battle across the wide sea, where victory and revenge and the Swedish throne were won, and Onela was slain. So Ecgtheow's son survived, No matter what dangers he met, what battles he fought, brave and forever triumphant, till the day fate set him to the dragon and sent him to death. A dozen warriors walked with their angry king when he was brought to the beast. Beowulf knew by then what had woken the monster and enraged it. The cup had come to him, traveled from dragon to slave to master to king, and the slave was their guide, had begun the Geats' affliction, and now, afraid of both beast and men, was forced to lead them to the monster's hidden home. He showed them the huge stones set deep in the ground, with the sea beating on the rocks close by. Beowulf stared, listening to stories of the gold and riches heaped inside. Hidden, but wakeful now, the dragon waited, ready to greet him. Gold and hammered armor had been buried in pleasanter places. The battle-brave king rested on the shore, while his soldiers wished him well, urged him on. But Beowulf's heart was heavy. His soul sensed how close fate had come, felt something, not fear, but knowledge of old age. His armor was strong, but his arm hung like his heart. Body and soul might part here. His blood might be spilled, his spirit torn from his flesh. Then he spoke. My early days were full of war, and I survived it all. I can remember everything. I was 7 years old when Raffel opened his home and his heart to me, when my king and my lord took me from my father and kept me, taught me, gave me gold and pleasure, glad that I sat at his knee. And he never loved me less than any of his sons. Herbald, the oldest of all, or Halfsin, or Hygelac, my lord. Herbald died a horrible death, killed while hunting. Halfsin, his brother, stretched his horn-tipped bow, sent an arrow flying, but missed his mark, and hit Herbald instead, found him with a bloody point and pierced him through. The crime was great. The guilt was plain, but nothing could be done. No vengeance, no death to repay that death, no punishment, nothing. So, with the graybeard whose son sins against the king and is hanged, he stands watching his child swing on the gallows, lamenting, helpless, while his flesh and blood hangs for the raven to pluck. He can raise his voice in sorrow, but revenge is impossible. And every morning he remembers how his son died and despairs. No son to come matters, no future heir, to a father forced to live through such misery. The place where his son once dwelled, before death compelled him to journey away, is a windy wasteland, empty, cheerless. The childless father shudders seeing it. So riders and ridden sleep in the ground. Pleasure is gone. The harp is silent, and hope is forgotten.